everybody, and welcome to today's episode of Attendance Bias. I'm your host, Brian Weinstein. Before we get started with today's episode, I just want to remind everyone that if you enjoy this podcast, you can show your support by leaving a rating and a review of it wherever you get your podcasts. Also, you can visit www.buymeacoffee.com/attendance-bias and donate anything you can to keep the podcast going. Now, on to today's episode. The idea of a Phishaersary, acknowledging and maybe even celebrating the date of your first Phish show is a fun part of our community, and even more fun is when Phish plays a show on the same date as your first. Even better than that is when you get to attend a show that was played on the same day as your first. Then there's the trifecta. When Phish plays a show on the same date as your first, you're able to go, and it's a decades-long round number anniversary. And on top of that, they play a big-time party show all in the same night. Today's guest, Jefe from Arizona, is here to tell about his experience at such a show. October 24th, 2021 at the Fabulous Forum in Los Angeles. The same night, exactly 30 years after his first show in 1991. The beginning of the so-called 4.0 era was an odd time in America, but in retrospect, in our small Phish community, it's an easy call to say that the fall 2021 tour featured some of the best live music since the band returned in 2009. I would guess that most people link the fall 2021 tour with the stunning and controversial Halloween shows in Las Vegas, which featured the Numbers show, the Animals show, and the confounding Sci-Fi Soldier set. But there were many West Coast highlights leading up to that, including today's show from LA. While the band blew people's minds with the psychedelic spacey show the night prior in Chula Vista, this LA show was more of a party night, getting off to a casual start, but then literally rocking the house during the second set with a tweezer and a surprise cover for the ages. But this is Jefe's story, so let's join him to talk about Prescott, Arizona, unexpected song arrangements, and more as we discuss October 24th, 2021 at the Forum in Los Angeles. Jefe, welcome to Attendance Bias. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you, Brian.
Thank you for being here. I'm glad to have you here. We are here today to discuss, I don't know about underrated, but maybe an under-discussed show, I guess I could say, from the fall 2021 tour. That would be October 24th, 2021 at the Forum, the Fabulous Forum in LA. I have mixed feelings about that venue, and we'll get to it maybe a little bit later, but I am excited to talk about this show because I remember when it was played, it kind of in a small way, at least for a day or two while Phish was on tour, blew up the internet for a while.
I was off the internet because I was on tour at the time, but I know where the buzz was coming from for sure.
Yeah, and it was very exciting, and the whole tour was very exciting, and we'll get to it in a minute. We'll kind of zoom out and hear what the fall 21 tour was like for those of us who were there or weren't there. But before we do that, Jefe, let's hear about who you are and why you're here with the Attendance Bias Lightning Round.
All right.
Attendance Bias Lightning Round.
So, Jefe, when was your first Phish show, and what do you remember about it?
My first Phish show was 10/24/1991. Prescott, Arizona, small mountain town, cowboy town, that had an alternative liberal arts college. And a lot of kids from the East Coast who had connections with the band and used student union money to get Phish to come play. Not a lot of venues in Prescott. And so there's a old hotel on the main drag by the town square, really small town. And it had a little ballroom, a little dinner hall. Tickets were, I think, like $3.50 or something. I had already listened to Phish. My girlfriend was from Burlington, so I could not wait to see Phish live, finally. One thing I really remember was I was expecting this shaggy Trey, and Trey had a buzz cut. His hair was, I've never seen him before or since with hair so short. And it may sound silly, but it kind of informed the jamming or something. It just seemed kind of fierce instead of groovy. He didn't look like a hippie, and I was expecting a hippie. So,
Well, what you said really, really interests me in that the people who kind of got into the student union and then started booking their favorite bands, right? Kind of the proto version of We Are Everywhere, right?
that's
Where
right.
we were even in '93, where we infiltrating the people who make the decisions, right? As is really happening now that we're in our 40s and 50s, some of us. What was the scene like? Do you remember? Like, how big was the venue? Did people show up? Was it just the people in the know, or were they trying to promote and gain an audience? Do you remember? Did you have that vision at the time, or was it just, oh, I've heard some of these songs, I'm going to go check out this band? As simple as that.
Well, I mean, it was my girlfriend's local band. When she came to college in Arizona, she brought a box of bootlegs and a shoebox full of Pollock show flyers, like
Wow.
those original Xerox paper that was taken down off of a light pole or a doorway somewhere. Out west, not a lot of people knew about Phish. Deadheads, did a little bit, but I think the East Coast kids at the school, it was only people from the school. It wasn't just for the school, but this town is in the mountains, so it's kind of isolated. And the demographic there, it's just not a liberal, it was not a liberal place except for the bastion that was Prescott College, which was, the band even commented that it was a lot like Goddard. It reminded them a lot of Goddard in just the alternative teaching and curriculum. So, and just the students, I think they said something like, we haven't seen this many weirdos since Goddard. So it's
That must have
cool.
felt great.
Oh, it felt awesome. Yeah.
Well, that sounds outstanding. I'll have to go and listen to that show as soon as possible. But moving closer to the present, Jefe, what was your most recent Phish show and what did you think of it?
My most recent Phish show was 9/21/25, night 3 at Hampton Coliseum. And it was amazing. I loved the show. I think it's my favorite night of the run. I mean, it had some of my favorite jamming, but I think it's maybe a true attendance bias show for me because we had perfect seats, a perfect crew, all that. Just the surroundings, my mindset, and the show is pretty awesome as well. The Sense and Subtle Sounds was my favorite thing, and Harry Hood's my favorite song. So a Hood encore with my loved ones around was just really special. And it was a bucket list venue for me. I'd never been there before.
Oh, what'd you think of Hampton?
Oh, I loved it. I mean, I was a deadhead when I was a teenager. I saw the West Coast shows immediately before the Hamptons Warlocks show. So, back then to get set lists, we would call a hotline and hear a recording of the set list. And, when word spread that they dropped the Dark Star and all that, that's where the aura really started for me. And so it was really special to finally go there. And I've been enamored by the architecture and stuff my whole life too. I loved the hassle of it too, like there's storied venue with like dilapidated infrastructure or not updated. It makes there's some barriers to enjoyment there, but once the lights go down, it's just, there's nothing like it. Those walls have absorbed so much amazing music and times over the years that I could feel. That's what I was feeling when I was in there.
Yeah, I've spoken a lot about that on this podcast about there's a lot of new updated venues. I think in Portland, Oregon. I forget exactly what it's called, but it's like,
The climate
yes,
pledge. Yep,
Climate Pledge Arena. Then there's these venues that I say are held together by nostalgia and glue, like the
that's
Nassau
right.
Coliseum or Hampton Coliseum, that they don't have nearly the amenities or the, like you said, the infrastructure. But once the lights go down and you're just in your place, it doesn't matter. It
It
doesn't matter.
doesn't.
It's like Star Wars compared to Star Trek. Like Star Wars is lived in that universe. It's dirty. Like a million
Yes,
people have been to the cantina, but in Star Trek, everything's sterile and
that's
it's more
right.
about ideas and cerebral. Star Wars is more about the action, and that's kind of how I see those two. It's not that it's always binary, but those two kinds of
I
venues.
I like that. That's really good. Yeah.
Well, today's show, the 24th, October 24th, 21 at the Forum, and we'll get to this highlight, is kind of held together in the second set by a tweezer into LA Woman. What is your favorite song by The Doors other than LA Woman, if you even have one?
Well, I'd have to say I'm not a big Doors fan. I was a big Doors fan when I was a teenager. I think, a lot of people go through those experimentation days and discover classic rock. And I certainly did. And I loved the Doors. But as an adult, I kind of grew out of the Doors, if you will. But there's a song, and I think it was released after Jim Morrison died, the album called American Prayer.
Yeah, it was like a recitation of his poetry, right?
That's right. Over some really groovy jams. I
Hmm.
mean, really good music. And so there's one called Ghost Song,
Sure.
eh, which, I could listen to Jim Morrison kind of ramble on like that forever with good music in the background. So I'd say Ghost Song. Yeah. Could I sing a Million Doors song? Still, of course. You know.
Right. I think you're right. I think the Doors play this kind of, at least in America, this kind of pivotal role in maybe the lives of 12 to 14-year-olds, maybe plus or minus a few years, that it's like their introduction, and I include myself in this crowd, in this generalization of, oh, things were cool 30 or 40 years before I was into
Yes,
music. And, this is a little bit off the beaten path as opposed to the Beatles, which might be a lot of young kids' first favorite classic rock band. The Doors are scary. They're dirty. They're dark. They're weird. But like you said, they're not that hard to outgrow. They're not as musically proficient or as deep. I don't think they're not as deep as some other rock bands of the time.
agreed. Yeah. But as far as being just instrumental in opening doors
Yeah.
of perception, really, I think when people start to experiment with mind altering substances too, the Doors are weird and trippy, and like with Pink Floyd and all those kind of bands that I group together, even though they're vastly different. Yeah, yeah, really.
Yeah. Well, they're kind of the reason that head shops will always be around.
That's
You know, I,
classic.
I work, I'm a
You're
middle
absolutely right.
I'm a middle school teacher. There's always going to be a 14-year-old kid who wants to go get like a
Uh,
mushroom
Tapestry.
candle, or a tapestry is the word I
Yeah.
was looking for. There's always going to be a kid who wants to burn incense for the first time in his bedroom. There's always going
That's
to be a
right.
kid who wants a Jim Morrison poster, and it's just never ending. It's a self-perpetuating thing.
You're so right. And it's so funny you say that because the head shop near my house has a mural with Jim Morrison, a huge Jim Morrison face
Of
on
course they do.
it. Classic.
Looking back to Phish a little bit, when you go to a Phish show with a crew, like when you went, you just said to Hampton with a great group of people, if you were to kind of be a fly on the wall and look at your group of friends with you still in it, what role would you say you play? Are you the organizer? Are you the chaos agent? Are you the quiet one? Are you the supplier? What role do you play within your group of friends, if you have one?
Well, in my notes, I wrote that I'm the designated driver and I'm also the designated dancer. I make friends with the show neighbors too, so maybe I'm an ambassador. Maybe you could
I
add
like
that.
that.
Maybe you could add that to your list because I do go out of my way to try and get to know people or at least establish relationships with those around us for many different reasons. But
I like that a lot. Like to establish good relations with those
that's right.
around you. So during the show, if anyone needs anything, if something goes wrong, you've already established that you're good and they should be good to you both ways. I like that a
That's
lot.
that's right.
And finally, what is the weirdest thing you've ever seen at a Phish show?
Oh gosh. I think weird is subjective for one, and especially when you are on the Phish end of the spectrum. I think Dick's a couple of years ago there was a rain delay and told everyone to go to their cars and it was a heavy duty storm. I think that's the night that there was a naked guy wandering around down on the floor.
Wearing
That
boots, no less.
that's right. But that wasn't the weirdest thing. The weirdest thing was seeing a guy in the venue with his dog. He brought in a big pit bull. It's just not something you expect to see in the venue. At this point, they had just opened the gates, I
Yeah.
think. And this guy was a fan, and I loved seeing the dog, but I remember just doing a double take. Like, I've never seen a dog inside a show before. So I'd say that's the weirdest thing.
When was this show played?
Let's take a look at the 2021 fall tour. And when I try to do this, it's hard to separate each tour, the summer and fall tour, because 2021 was an odd year to just be a person. Forget about Phish. 2021, my memory of it is when regular, and I put that in quotes, regular life kind of eased back into existence. Not that COVID was over, but it had kind of receded a little bit in the public consciousness, or at least people were kind of stepping out of their houses into the daylight when public gatherings were slowly becoming more common. Because the
Yes.
2020 Phish schedule, summer tour, whatever else was on the docket after Mexico was completely canceled and rescheduled for the next year. Now we're in the next year. So I was looking through the itinerary of the 2021 the fall tour. It's 13 shows. It began in Sacramento, then went down to San Francisco, or west to San Francisco, I guess, for 2 arena shows, north for 2 nights in Eugene, Oregon, for a standalone night in Phoenix, which has been covered on this show. They then cut west to Chula Vista, today's show in Los Angeles, and then Santa Barbara, and then a 4 night Halloween run in Las Vegas that closed the tour with the Sci-Fi Soldier set. And that's when I think we can safely say, well, COVID is not over, because I think just about every person I spoke to or heard about going to that show became sick in some way after those 4 nights at the MGM Grand.
Yeah, that was a super spreader event for sure.
And so, what was your fall 2021 like? Was this LA show the only show that you saw? Did you see a bunch? How did you feel going into indoor venues at the time? What was your life like in the fall of 2021?
Well, I saw Dick's. So Dick's was the first introduction to crowds again. I can't remember when Fall Tour was announced, probably before Dick's, but I think we were wearing masks, even outdoors at Dick's. When it comes to Fall Tour, I think one thing that this year did is it introduced kind of West Coast tours a little bit more again. We've had spring tour ever since, maybe missing a year here or there, but in general, we're kind of starved for shows out here. We get Dick's every year. A lot of West Coast people just see Dick's every year. So this was a huge treat for me. And the stars just kind of aligned. I had a friend with a connection for tickets. After COVID, I had hundreds of hours of paid time off from work, and I had some friends that were down to go on tour. And I had not followed a band around the country since I was a teenager in the late 80s. And so this was really exciting for me. Like it just was this rekindled, it wasn't nostalgic, but it was amazing to get in a car and drive and see other people on the road that you knew were going to the same place you were, and that kind of stuff. So I would say the stars really aligned. I had met my partner just before COVID, so we could finally see shows together after Shoreline and Dick's and the summer tour in general. It was pretty obvious that the band was feeling it. And I was up to date on listening and streaming and stuff. You know, who knows what was going to happen in the fall, but I think, you know, it definitely came out. They definitely kept the ball rolling.
Yeah, this tour is outstanding, musically speaking. I know that the Sci-Fi Soldier set is kind of mixed reviews, to
Mm-hmm.
be diplomatic about it. Not everyone loves it or gets it. But overall, when you talk to people about, I guess, what a lot of people would call 4.0, right? Post-COVID tours, that 2021, especially fall 2021, is always up there. Like the
Yes.
Phoenix show from this tour is outstanding.
Yeah. Yeah. So I live in Arizona. I'm a native here, and I wasn't sleeping in my own bed because I was driving to Chula Vista the next day. But the opportunity to see Phish outdoors in late October, it was incredible. I skipped Eugene, but I saw everything else. It was even after just a couple nights, you could feel it. You could feel that the band was having fun. They were playing with new toys and new sounds. They were inspired. And it just seemed like night after night, like this doesn't happen all the time, you know, where it just seems like night after night is a hot, hot show. By the time they were rolling up to LA, everybody, it was, you know, word had gotten around. You know, I think one thing that's kind of funny is I remember looking online during this time, and East Coasters, maybe on, you know, reading threads on Phish.net, and East Coasters were, there was some bitterness going on the East, from East
Isn't there
Coasters, I
always?
think.
Speaking as an East
uh,
Coaster.
because it's really easy to say, oh, they're an East Coast band, or they're just warming up. You know, when they play out here and then go out east, they're just warming up for Alpharetta or whatever. And it was pretty obvious that they were really hot. You know, I think for a lot of people, streaming shows on the East Coast is really tough when you have a
Yeah.
job, because you can't stay up that late. So people would wake up in the morning and read the hype about these shows. This was such a good show, and they go, I don't know about that. I'll
Yeah.
listen for myself. So they go into the listening already with maybe a chip on their shoulder, or wanting it to fail. That's what I felt, is like every night was just maybe not getting better, but they just kept the bar so high. It was incredible. That Phoenix show. What's funny is I felt that Phoenix show, I wasn't let down by any means, but in the moment, I felt like it was kind of on the lower end of these fall tour shows. Still fantastic, but you know, maybe I had the opposite of attendance bias for that one. You know, maybe I let expectations or hopes and dreams get in the way during that show. Not sure, but the next night was mind blowing in Chula Vista.
And it's funny you say that because this show, the Los Angeles show that I had heard just bits and pieces of before I gave it a full listen for our discussion, it didn't blow me away the first listen.
Hmm.
But the more I listened to it, the better and better it got. It's
Yeah.
it's almost like Stockholm syndrome for Phish. Like the more I listened to it, the more I loved it. And we touched on this little bit earlier in our conversation about venues. Before we go into set one, the Los Angeles Forum. I've been there once before. I have not been there since. It is firmly in that Star Wars class of different
Uh-huh.
venues, right? It's seen everything. It's absorbed so many vibrations and experiences through the walls. When I went back there, I was there for one show, and I say this with love, and I won't say nostalgia, but not negatively. It was the worst Phish show I've ever seen.
Is
It was
that
just,
right?
yeah, July 22nd, 2016 at the Los Angeles Forum, worst show I've ever seen. And it wasn't necessarily the band. The band didn't exactly blow me away, but it was the crowd. And
Is that right?
it was all chatter all the time. I think I was all
Uh,
the way upstairs with people who are on like first dates and kind of yelling
yes.
at each other like in conversation. Didn't love it, didn't love the vibe, but I loved the venue. I felt like I had stepped back in time because I'm on the East Coast and have been my entire life. I felt like before Madison Square Garden was renovated and it was the old MSG, it was like being there,
Yes.
but in the mid 2010s. And I felt like I loved the garish red in the concourses. I
Yeah.
love that you had to walk 1,000 steps up to get to your seat. I was filled with love. It's enormous also
Yeah.
on the inside.
Uh-huh.
It's a huge arena. I loved it. I just wish I saw a better show there. So I'm
Uh,
glad that you did. What are your thoughts or feelings, if you have any, about the Fabulous Forum?
well, I had a lot of history there too. I saw a lot of Grateful Dead concerts there. I joke that they could repaint it a million times inside, but there's still some brain matter, some of my brain matter splattered up on the ceiling of that place. So I had a lot of memories from that place, really good memories, and from a really just formidable time in my development as a young person. I love the fact that that you can go outside onto the concourse,
Yeah,
similar to Hampton in that way. I love the Forum. I actually went back there this summer. I saw Lady Gaga there this summer,
fun.
and that was the best show I saw this year, I think, for sure. But yeah, love the Forum. I think that show you mentioned in 16 has a reputation, doesn't it, as
It
kind of a
must.
clunker?
I guess so. I live inside my own head sometimes.
Yeah.
But when you were describing your excitement at being back on tour for the first time in X many years in 2016, that was my first West Coast tour. My now wife, she and I had been dating for about a year, and it was time for me to meet the parents. She's from San Francisco.
Uh-huh.
So we took a trip to San Fran and I met her parents. We stayed at their place and we saw 3 nights. Let me see if I get this right. 3 nights at the Bill Graham in San
Yeah.
Francisco, which were awesome. Great shows. And I love that venue too. We drove very far north to the Gorge, went
Wow.
back down to spend another night in San Fran, and then drove down the coast to the show at the Forum. And to me, West Coast was just more adventurous
Yes.
because when you're on the East Coast tour, at least in my experience doing like the I-95 corridor, you're on a highway the whole time. For the most
Yep.
part, if you're going between, I don't know how long it's been since Phish played Boston, but let's even say Great Woods, New York, Philadelphia, Meriwether Post, you're just kind of following a straight line. And
Yep.
going out west, it looks different when you look outside the windows. Like, it's just
Yeah.
more visually exciting. Culturally, it's a lot more laid back, but encouraging in a way. Like
Yep.
you're not waiting to get stuck in traffic necessarily the way you are here. I don't know. There's just a whole different experience, and I loved it. I just think that LA show, maybe if we had different seats, maybe if it were a different day of the week, who knows? But if you go to however many number of shows, one of them's got to be the worst.
That's right. And you know what? That is something that LA is known for, regardless of venue, is that kind of There are so many date night kind of people, and there's a lot of people in LA that treat a show that we just drove from Oregon or something to see. There's people that are treating the ticket price like a cover charge. I've and lots of chompers. LA is just kind of known for that. I've been at shows that are blowing my mind and hear people say, "Let's get out of here and go here or there. Let's go to this bar." They're treating this a show like a cover charge at a club. So I get that, and that can certainly detract from the experience.
Set 1.
Well, if people treated the show we're about to get into like a preamble to something later in the night, their loss. So let's dig right into it. Set 1 opens with A Wave of Hope, which on my first listen, I thought was an odd choice for a show opener. Maybe they were trying to break in a new song and finding its place in the set list, because it debuted on August 7th that same year. So just a couple months earlier at Deer Creek. This is only the second performance of the song. You could tell it's very rote. It's a short version, just under 5 minutes, and you can hear the crowd in the audience get quiet once it begins, trying to figure out like what's going on. There's a really nice piano solo from Page, but then when they follow it up with You Enjoy Myself, the place explodes. Like, oh, this is the show that's starting now.
Yes, that was my experience exactly in-house. Was what song is this? And then when You Enjoy Myself started, it was like, no matter what the opener was, if you get You Enjoy Myself in the second slot, that feels good.
And this is a great jam in You Enjoy Myself. It is not a typical YEM. You know, it's fallen into this kind of routine, but then I think it was the Beacon jams where I think, to my memory, where they added the second jam, or maybe it was the New Year's Eve show at the Ninth Cube when they didn't just do a vocal jam. After the vocal jam, they went back into a second jam. And that's right. What they do here. And man, it is awesome. Like there was, it's very relaxed to me, but there's, I don't know, there's some resolution, a huge bass bomb at 19 minutes, and this weird left turn that sounds like they're about to go into sand, but it really is more usual You Enjoy Myself funk jamming. And
Yes.
the vocal jam is very short, which I'm perfectly okay with.
Yeah. Yeah. And that was, I think, every time a yem comes out mid set, I'm always thinking, how's the vocal jam going to work here? We're in the middle of the set. So when it was resigned to 15 seconds or something like
Yeah.
that, I think that was amazing. I think there's a bunch of kind of like floaty, embryonic kind of ambient space during the jam, which was really neat. I mean, I think it's kind of a long You Enjoy Myself as well. But yeah, that the short vocal jam right into MoMA, incredible.
I agree. And usually it's the moment dance that's played second. So it's straight in from You Enjoy Myself. It's a perfect segue, which became a trend throughout this whole show. Like
Yes,
every song that segued into the next was beautifully done. And there was Washifisi driving to Firenze quotes at the beginning of the moment dance. So
that's
right
right.
away, you know that something's up. This isn't going to be a regular show.
That's right. Everyone's mind was blown while we were dancing our butts off. Those are two great tastes that go great together right there. You know, Yem and MoMA.
Yeah, well put. And then after that is another, I wrote strange and sudden shift into simple. I don't know. I think maybe the airy feel of You Enjoy Myself and the moment dance. I think you said the word dreamy. It's kind of this dreamy, soft. I don't know. Maybe I'm just thinking it. And I don't know. Maybe it wasn't doing it for the band because they go right into it, into simple, that is. And it shows a lot of pep. There's a lot of energy and hard rock. Trey is playing a lot of rhythm guitar to start the jam, which I always think is a good sign because it gives the other guys some space to step forward.
Absolutely. In my notes, and this is something that I think is pertinent to the rest of the show. At the end of songs, and this was especially true in 2021, there's this area that I call middle space, for lack of any other word.
I like
And
it already.
instead of ending the song or rip chording into something, this tour this year, and especially this show, they had this incredibly patient, ambient ending to almost every song for a minute or two before they figured out what they wanted to do next. And, you know, it's like for MoMA to go type 2 and get spacey was really neat. And then boom into simple, which is, you know, obviously a crowd pleaser.
Yeah, always good. And moment dance was only 8 minutes. So when they switch into simple, complete with a jam and MoMA, it was very satisfying, right? Not to brush it aside, even though it's short. There's a lot of flair from Page during simple, but I love what you said that they were showing a lot of patience because when he plays that rhythm guitar, it shows that he doesn't have to guide the rest of the band or the jam. Simple ends up with this weird rhythm, this weird, or I guess straightforward rock rhythm with a wah wah pedal, and they start singing and playing Waiting All Night, which is
Yes.
my favorite part of this set.
I mean, that was so unique and fun and seemed to just work like a great segue and an alternate arrangement of a song. That's like these guys, they felt kind of at ease and at the same time just kind of cavalier or fearless a lot on this tour. And I think that Waiting All Night is a perfect example of that. Just going for it. It felt good, it felt right, and it worked.
I agree 100%. It sounds 100% improvised and it works perfectly well. And I thought because they're in Los Angeles, I don't think this was intentional, but I felt like I'm listening to like the 1970s California sound, like the
Oh,
Eagles or Steely Dan, because Waiting All Night kind of has that vibe, even the album version does. But
that's right.
when you put this little bit of more of I use this word in quotes, heavy drum beat behind it, because like you said, it's an alternative arrangement that probably just popped up out of nowhere. To me, it sounds like it really could be one of those 70s LA bands.
I agree. It had a soft rock, kind of a soft rock thing going. And I think Page's, I don't know the name of the keyboard, but he used it a lot on this show, but it's kind of has a real kind of vintage analog-y sound. And then there's kind of a shuffle swing to a lot of the jams in the show. And the Waiting All Night was just so fun.
Yeah, it's in line with the slow llama or something like that. When it's something we all know, but it's still new, and you can almost hear them smiling at each other as it's growing, as it's
That
blossoming.
that's right.
And then there's a big turnaround from Waiting All Night when they start playing Maze. And I'm
Yeah.
wondering what the crowd was like. Was it whiplash or was it, just take it as it comes? What do you think, if you remember?
I mean, I do remember, and I think the maze was a great call. after that waiting all night. Because waiting all night, I think, some people's ears didn't like it as much, that waiting all night. Maybe it seemed a little awkward or tentative or something like that. To drop Maze was like, okay, now we're going to start. Here comes some tension. This was nice, and everything up to this point has been really dancey and groovy and stuff. And it's like, okay, now we need this part of the program to start.
Right, we got to blow your minds a little bit. And
That's
about
right.
6.5 minutes, I wrote down, that was my first timestamp. They really, really do. This is a big time maze that, must have blown people's brains a little bit before they bring it back down to an even tempo with Fee, which is always a fan favorite, and through the megaphone, no less.
That's right. So this is something that I haven't mentioned yet, that this show is 10/24/21. And if you remember, my first show in Prescott College was 10/24/91. So this was my 30th Phishaersary show, which is, on paper, it's like, oh, cool. It's just kind of a thing. But I couldn't help but to feel like this was an episode of This Is Your Life, like, do you, okay, Jefe, do you remember this, with the megaphone and stuff. So Fee, I have a little bit of video on my phone from one of the verses of Fee, and it gets progressively more shaky before I just turn it off, because the dancing, me dancing and everyone around dancing, I mean, it was very joyous. The show had a real kind of party vibe to it. I know that you were wondering what it was like in-house. Because do you listen to, I know when you play clips on your podcast, you're using audience tapes. For legal reasons, I'm sure. But do you listen to audience tapes, or do you listen to live Phish?
For years and years and years, when I was first getting into the band, all the way up to like 2002, right when they came back at Madison Square Garden, it was whatever I could find. And for the most part, whatever I could find was audience recordings. So my ears and brain just kind of, that's the standard, right? Audience recording, soundboard would be a gift. It would be the rarity.
That's right.
A treat. And then once they came back and you could easily access soundboard recordings, it was like, oh, what am I doing listening to audience recordings? But then since I've started this podcast, depending on the recording itself, I think I prefer audience recordings, because since about maybe 2010 or 2011, just the technology of day-to-day recording, like audio, and also I'd throw in light rigs, the technology that's available to the everyday person is just unbelievable. So to me, I tend to like audience recordings, but I have nothing against soundboards, of course. I feel like that would be blasphemy to say that.
I think when it comes to older audience recordings from back in the day, I love listening to them, even if they're not that great, because to really get a sense of the air in the room. And sometimes you can hear people screaming in like a scared manner or uncomfortable way or whatever. So I think it can be really valuable to listen to an audience tape. And I think maybe that could inform your opinion of this show, right? Because you were wondering, you heard silences and you heard eruptions that you don't hear as much on the soundboard.
Absolutely, which is why Matrix is the way to go. But
Matrix is the way to go.
yeah, but so Fee is always a fan favorite, and then they play Steam with another direct segue. It was like simple into Waiting All Night. This is not an alternative arrangement of Steam, but there's no break. They play right into it. Trey is utilizing the whammy pedal, and Fishman is kind of playing around with the beat. It's like you said, it's like a party atmosphere where the band is a little bit looser than usual, but they go for it when they see an opening.
That's right. That's accurate.
I love it. And we're already at the end of the set. It went so quickly. They're closing with Run Like an Antelope, classic, a short intro segment before they break into the main part of the song. Trey and Phish are especially spicy, and I like it a lot. And then Paige joins in, complimenting Trey's riffing. And when the double time starts at about 6.5 minutes, the jam is over by 8 minutes. It's a good, although it's a perfunctory Run Like an Antelope.
Yep. That's what I had. I had not particularly fierce.
Yeah.
But a really good antelope. Nothing noteworthy about it, but.
And the whole set is not particularly fierce, but it's a hell of a lot of fun.
That's right. And the one thing during Steam, the song before, in my notes, I said, finally some legit shred.
Yeah.
And it's funny that it took Steam. It came during Steam. You would have expected some serious fire from Trey during Maze, maybe. But there was none of that. It was, in general, loose and fun. Yeah, so great. I mean, great set closer there. And I think kind of, foreshadowed what was to come a little bit.
Hi, everybody. Brian here to welcome you to the set break of today's episode of Attendance Bias. First, thank you for listening. And second, just a quick reminder to tell you that even though Attendance Bias comes to you for free, it does take a lot of work and it does take quite a bit of money to keep the lights on here at production. So I just wanted to ask a small favor if you could support the podcast in any number of the following ways. If you could leave a review or a rating of it on whichever podcast app you use. If you could spread the word, telling a friend or someone you think may be interested in it about it. Or probably the most concrete way is to go to www.buymeacoffee.com/attendancebias and donate however much you can financially to help with the continuing costs of Attendance Bias. So thank you again so much for listening, and I hope you enjoy the second half of today's episode.
Set 2.
Well, what was to come to open set 2 is Cars, Trucks, and Buses. I always love hearing this song. It was played at my first show, so I have the sentimental love for it. And it functions well, I think, as a set opener anyway. But Paige has a great piano solo at 1.5 minutes. He leads the rest of the band, as he should, because he wrote the song. And then they really drop the hammer, kind of like a wave of hope. And then You Enjoy Myself, Cars, Trucks, and Buses, and then Tweezer. Kind of like,
That's
all right,
right.
This is a kickoff, just like You Enjoy Myself in the first set.
That's right. And one thing I wanted to note was this was the first Tweezer of the tour.
Oh, wow.
So as somebody who had seen a bunch of all these shows, there was a palpable anticipation. The same as you get in a 3-night run. When are they going to drop the Tweezer? I'm feeling the Tweezer tonight. And this went on for 8 shows, I think. This is 8 shows into the tour and no Tweezer yet. And I looked it up, and this is the 4th largest gap for Tweezer in its history. I think 11 show gap, which is considered large for Tweezer.
For sure.
So when they dropped the Tweezer, it was on.
And it really was, because it's nice to have You, Enjoy Myself, and Tweezer in the same show, no matter what.
Oh, hell
And
yeah.
then at about 5 minutes into this Tweezer, which is usually around the time the jam starts, right? That's after the Uncle Ebenezer part. And they go through the composed section of the song by about 5 minutes standard. And they start teasing LA Woman immediately.
Yes.
And they're about a minute into playing LA Woman before the official track listing switches over to
That's
LA
right.
Woman. So I wanted to ask you, we'll never ever know. So this is opinion and nothing else. Was this rehearsed? Because it didn't sound like a perfect, picture perfect version of like a Doors tribute band playing LA Woman. Like Fishman is playing at halftime for most of it. But it did sound like they didn't miss any chords. They didn't play any wrong notes.
That's right. I think it was the word on the street afterwards is that it was sloppy and all this, but I think it was rehearsed briefly, probably just, in the dressing room before the show kind of thing. And they're so good they can remember or pick up where they left off 20 years ago or whenever the last time they played it was. It was a feeding frenzy in there. I mean,
Yeah.
if the frenzy started during Tweezer, once they drop into the LA Woman for real, where you realize it's not a tease, that set the place on fire for sure.
I bet. My guess is that it's kind of like, I think the date is November 2nd, 98, when they played Dark Side of the Moon, right, in the second set, inside of Harpua, where, yeah, sure, you could say it's sloppy and not, sloppy in quotes, not literally, but they definitely maybe gave it a once over. This is
Right.
the sort of stuff like you and I were saying at the beginning of our conversation that a lot of young adolescents go through a phase, at least for the Doors. And LA Woman is one of their best songs. It is a great song, period.
That's right.
No matter what, even
That's
if you've
right.
outgrown the Doors, as we said, LA Woman is probably in this band's DNA. I always thought of Phish as your four friends who formed a band and they're still playing in the basement or in the garage, but they all happen to be four of the greatest musical savants in the nation. And they could
That's
just play
right.
anything just for funsies. And
That's
this
right.
night it was LA Woman, and they played it better than the corner cover band, even if they spent hours practicing it.
That's right. It was out of control. And in the moment, you're not hearing the slop.
Right.
You're so, it was just so fun. And I mean, I think that the party show, that just even solidified the party vibes. LA Woman, come on now.
Yeah, and how much fun. It must have been the greatest thing to have, I don't know what, 16, 17, 18,000 people scream Mr. Mojo Rising along with the band. I mean,
Yeah,
everyone must have felt like they were on stage.
that's right. And that is where, and I wrote this in my notes, that is when it was real that this was LA Woman. This just wasn't a tease or a prolonged tease or quoting LA Woman. This is where they're actually playing the whole song. It hit everybody in that moment. You're like, it was just hard to believe.
And it's extended, right? It's like a 4-minute track before they play, or they go back to Tweezer, kind of. Now it's kind of a mashup between LA Woman and Tweezer, because I wrote Tweezer with Mr. Mojo Rising teases. So it's like, what camp?
Yep.
It's what's the point at that point? But they really hold it together when they start Say It To Me Santos, which is a goofy transition, but man, does it hit the spot. They went from a crowd sing along from LA Woman into Say It To Me Santos. You own that crowd.
That's right. And an arena anthemic arena song like that.
The lights must have been going crazy.
Oh God. It just, again, it felt like just a celebratory, no F's given kind of show, like a party show. And it was especially highlighted as a party show because the night before in Chula Vista was this mind-melting, incredible, weird, insane show. So this one was a perfect counterpart. It was like, here's fun party Phish. We broke your brain last night. Tonight, we're going to have a lot of fun. And the Santos is... it is the outlier Santos. It's the only time Santos has been taken for a walk. It's the only jammed out Santos in all 40 performances or whatever of the song.
And it's a good jam, by the way. It's not just an asterisk to say, they jammed Santos. At 7 minutes and 30 seconds, I wrote, well, first of all, there's Tweezer teases throughout. And
that's
then
right.
About 7.5 minutes, there's this like major key happy jam, bliss jamming, and it's a common type of jam from 2021. I thought it sounded like the year, if you know what
Yeah,
I mean.
I
And
do.
then they go
Yeah,
back into LA Woman teases.
that's right. I have like a pensive ambient space with this kind of mojo.
Yeah.
They were playing the mojo teases in a really Doorsy jam, you
Yeah,
know?
very. And you mentioned a lot earlier that a characteristic of the band's playing style during this tour was being a little bit extra patient, you know, going another way around or waiting an extra minute and a half before moving into a different song. I think that's very clear here because at the end of Say It To Me Santos, Trey starts teasing what's the use, but it's not forced and it's not quick and it's not rushed because
That's
he
right.
does it like 3 or 4 times and it's probably a whole minute and a half, which doesn't sound like a lot listening on a podcast, but when you're listening in real time, 90 seconds can be forever. But the
It's
whole band eventually drops into it and it's a full performance.
These were extended segues, I would say, a lot of them in
Yeah.
this show. Extended segues always have or a lot of times have one point where it becomes abrupt, right? Where they're playing cross-eyed and painless in a different key, and at some point, if you're going to play cross-eye, you have to kind of stop and restart in the correct key. So you hear that a lot in this show. So a mix of like really smooth segue and that 1 second of abruptness.
But you gotta crack an egg to make an omelet, right? I mean,
That's
it's
right.
that sort of
That's
thing,
right.
and it's paying off now to just bring everything literally to the current day in 24 and 2025. One of my favorite things about Phish now is that their jams are so fluid and they are able to kind of segue between songs without any mess. Maybe this
That's
was just a stopping point on the way.
that's right. Yeah, I mean I this is the start of 4.0, you
Yeah.
know, and I think a lot of foundational stuff for their sound now, you know, with less like broken robot and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. Good. I love that phrase. Well done.
I think that Santos jam is one of my favorite jams of the night, really. There's just this shuffle, a swinging kind of vibe to a lot of these jams that, you know, like you said, it had that, it has a harkens back to, it's not yacht rock, it's not soft rock, it's not the Eagles, but it is something familiar and still not all that common for Phish to emphasize those kind of jams or repeat them. So
Which is why we keep going back.
that's right.
You know, and after what's the use, you know, which by the way, they almost get completely quiet. It's almost a silent jam at about two and
Yes.
a half minutes before the end. It's very soulful, it's beautiful, and then they make the very interesting choice to go back into Tweezer, although
Yes.
with a cool melody that turns into a very short tease of Heartbreaker by Led
Yeah,
Zeppelin. Just at the time you realize what it is, they're on to the next thing.
that's right. And I think, you know, there were so many tweezer teases throughout this whole show or set that even though it seems like abrupt to start up tweezer, it it felt like a tweezer. The whole show felt like a tweezer fest.
Complete with
Even
teases all over the place.
that's right. And so it wasn't like a full tweezer fest, but it was pretty darn close. I made a note because I think my favorite part of this show is actually this tweezer, and this is, I think, officially tweezer number 2, you know,
Mm-hmm.
on the track listing. And you can, you know, Fishman, I think, was a huge key to 2021 sound. I remember, you know, whispering in friends' ears at every show I saw, and I said, just listen to the drummer. You can hear Phish driving a lot of jams. His input in the conversation was really pivotal in so many shows. And this one, he starts in with a cowbell a little bit, and then he switches to a wood block. And you can hear this wood block, and there's about only about 20 seconds, maybe 30 seconds of this jam. And I have it on video, and it's my favorite 10-second video that I've ever shot because it is happy. It is so unique. And I think right around 448 for you, if you write that down, there's just this, it's just so sweet. And Fishman on the wood blocks is a key element to that jam.
Absolutely. I wrote at that timestamp. I'm so blown away and glad that you wrote it at the same one. I wrote, this is good Phish jamming with barely a melody keeping things together, which to me implies it's the rhythm. It's Fishman
right.
doing it.
That's right. It is the lights, those lights that they used during 2001 that are kind of like phase shifting or something. They can kind of trigger something, but
Yeah,
that's
they rise up on the audience. Yeah.
That's right. The jittery lights during this section, it was just really, really good. There was a swing there that and some kind of telepathic playing where they link up so much, and it's amazing that they can find that place where it sounds composed and practiced, but it's a jam.
And just so we all keep ourselves together here, let's remember we're talking about a 4-minute segment of Tweezer, which is the second time they're playing this song in this set, right? I mean, it contains multitudes.
That's right.
From that Tweezer, they play Birds of a Feather, which is an interesting transition with Trey. Again, this is the theme of the show, singing it with a different vocal inflection than he normally does. It's a different version, not quite, but sort of Birds of a Feather. And then they do a quick switch to this like meandering, low-key jam with Trey leading the way. And Fishman, though, he's the one again with the typical peppy Birds of a Feather tempo. Like he's the one holding it together while the rest of the band gets to experiment, and it dissipates at about 8 minutes. And that's kind of the trend from now on, where a lot of these songs are fan favorites, and they're not long, they're not short. They're like right in kind of that median of like 7 or 8 minutes, but they're all held together, and they certainly bring excitement to the crowd. Between Birds of a Feather, Chalked Torture, and there's more after that, and Boogie on Reggae Woman. But those three are kind of like a triumvirate of, all right, we all know these three songs. Nothing goes outrageous about them, but they're all super fun. And for you, I guess, super dancey.
I call it the kitchen sink portion of a show where they've kind of, the work is done and they just start throwing out these. I mean, you don't hear like 5-minute chalk dusts very often, right? Or whatever. And there is, I did write down for all the specialists out there, there's a Dave's Energy Guide tease in that Birds of a Feather, a pretty pronounced DEG tease in there. So it's worth noting because Phish nerds there's a subset of Phish nerds that really hone in on those DEG teases.
Oh, I know. I've heard from them. I know.
So, just to keep the torch-bearing DEG mob away, we have to mention it.
I'm glad you did, because to me, it's kind of like the world is flat conspiracy. I don't know if Dave's Energy God really exists. I just think people just throw it out there and just say, oh, it's in this song, it's in that song, and no one's ever going to fact check them on it.
That's right. Well, Brian, it bugged me for so long because I felt like I was not a member of the club and I didn't really know what it was. And I went on a deep dive of DEG teases to try and learn what it was. I have it saved on my Instagram because it was a journey to try and figure it out. And it's just as much of a cluster as you just mentioned. Like, you don't know if it really exists. Is it a tease of a tease? What actually is it? So, but there is one there at 548.
And then we go into Chalked Torture. Again, a smooth transition, a big change atmospherically, as far as I could tell, in the vibe of the show. And this was a big theme of 2021, what became to be known as vocal stylings of Trey Anastasia, where he would take certain parts of very familiar songs and vocal melodies and sing them. Other people called it Broadway Trey.
Broadway Trey, exactly.
Yeah, he would go into a higher register or just emphasize certain parts in a way that he didn't before. But also, there's Birds of a Feather teases right away during the jam. So, like, this is this continuum, this whole set is of you're never really out of this set. We're never really on to the next song because there's drippings from the previous song still all over it. And,
that's right.
But, there's a cool little left turn at the jam. But again, like we said, it's not that long. It's about a 7-minute Chalked Torture before we go into a perfect segue of Boogie on Reggae Woman.
Yeah, and those teases, the Boogie on teases from Mike start pretty early, too, before the track actually shifts. There it is again, right? Boogie on. It's just like the kitchen sink. It's crowd favorite, jukebox kind of stuff.
Before we go to quite not a jukebox song is Carini, which is very jarring. I wrote, it was like, everything in Boogie On is upbeat and happy and smiley. And then here's this like monster coming after you now with Carini. And it seems to be a running theme throughout this show that like the atmosphere changes every now and again. But again, a kind of similar meandering Trey-led jam from Birds of a Feather kind of shows up again in Carini. More tweezer teases. And then fully back into Tweezer. And I'm surprised on Phish.in, it wasn't listed as a separate track in the set list. It's brief, but it's certainly not teases. It's like actual Tweezer right from Carini.
That's right. It is confusing. And I'm surprised they didn't kind of amend the official track listing for that, because after re-listening again, I saw that. And the Phish.net set list note, it just says, it basically mentions every song in the set contains elements of Tweezer.
Yeah, like might as well just cover yourself. Just say it all. Take it all in one shot. And we're already toward the end of the set with a Mr. Completely. I love this song. It had a little bit of a slow lift off, but it's a very short jam and it peters out to the beginning of Tweezer Reprise, which is standard. And it's funny, of all these songs listed, Tweezer Reprise is the one where you get your bearings.
That's right. It's finally resolved. It's some closure, you know? And
Yeah.
I love a tweezer reprise in the set and not
Right.
as not as an encore, you know?
And we're there. We're there at the encore with Grind, which is always a treat. It always a way to like reflect. And then they close the whole thing to me, I thought an unexpected choice as Bathtub Gin with a very languid jam that's easy to bop to and slowly dance, different from what I would expect for an encore, like say Character Zero or Sample in
Yes.
a Jar, because by around 11 minutes, it slows to a crawl, almost like some
Yes.
jams from 2004, and it's unfinished. We never get back to the end of
That's
Bathtub
right.
Gin. What a way to leave a show.
Yeah, incredible. I did want to mention that Grind, being that this was my 30th
Right.
Phishaersary, it felt just so apropos to me. And I think I went back to the hotel that night and figured out that I was 18,773 days old on October 24th, 2021. But that gin, I did find out that it was the first gin encore since 1991. So
Wow. Yeah.
another little synchronicity there. And it's funny you say languid. That's what I wrote in my notes. A very languid jam. One thing I listen for in jams a lot is Page. And when Page, he was playing that little, it's almost like a toy keyboard that has that kind of analog sound. I don't know what it is, but when he switches to the grand, oftentimes that's a signal. The rest of the band follows suit. That's where some hose starts or the band picks up or whatever. When he switches to that, it picks up for a while. Trey comes in with a filter, and you're expecting maybe this is going to keep rising to a peak, like a classic white light Phish peak, but it doesn't. It was more of this. I wrote powerful, but not shreddy. It
Yeah.
just had this kind of guttural thing to it that you are still expecting to keep rising, but then wouldn't you know, they finish out with more of that middle space that I'm talking about.
Yeah. Yeah. I wrote
It,
they slow to a crawl eventually.
yeah. And so it's just this atmospheric crap that stops and the show's over. And it wasn't awkward in the least because nothing was awkward about this show in the moment. And this is, when I've gone back to listen to this show, I've listened to the Yem, I've listened to the Santos, and I've listened to that Tweezer 2 part that I love so much. But this is, I think, the first like dedicated full listen that I've done. And that was things that didn't surprise me in the moment, surprised me on the re-listen. And ending a show on an ambient fizzle out, especially after a party vibe show, was really unique. I mean, I can't say I've ever seen it before or since. So really cool.
Well, Jefe, thank you a billion times over for taking the time to kind of put us in the forum with you and with thousands of others from October 24th, 2021. Those of you listening, you couldn't see me, but I couldn't stop smiling the whole time through our conversation. So one way that I listened to this show the first time when I wasn't too thrilled about it or from it, by it, and then listening to it again, I had a new view of it, and now I feel like I was there next to you. So, Jefe, thank you for taking the time to bring us in with you and giving us the experience of being at this show that marked your 30th Phishaersary.
Well, thank you, Brian. I love talking about Phish, and I loved this show. So I really appreciate you having me on. I love what you do, and keep nerd on, you know?
And that's it for today's conversation with Jefe from Arizona. If you couldn't tell, when Jefe ended our conversation by saying nerd on, he was speaking for both of us. We are both huge-time Phish nerds, so we had to have a pretty in-depth fact check for today.
Attendance bias fact check.
Jefe's first show in Prescott, Arizona on October 24th, 1991 was at the Crystal Ballroom at the Hotel St. Michael in Prescott. A soundboard recording is available on Phish.in, and notably, it features the last Slave to the Traffic Light that wouldn't be played again for 241 shows. For deadheads who are listening, when Jefe and I are talking about the Hampton Coliseum, Jefe mentions that he saw the West Coast shows before the, quote, Hampton Warlocks shows. Those shows, which have their own Wikipedia entry, were played on October 8th and 9th, 1989. The Dead wanted to keep the shows quiet, not literally, but they didn't announce them in the official tour announcement. They only allowed tickets to be sold at local outlets 10 days before the shows and billed themselves as the Warlocks instead of as the Grateful Dead. The album An American Prayer was released by The Doors in 1978, and it is exactly as Jefe and I describe it. The three surviving members of The Doors, Ray Manzarek, Robbie Krieger, and John Densmore, recorded some really groovy, interesting, and sometimes spacey music that was played underneath Jim Morrison's spoken word poetry, which he recorded many years before. The album was released as, quote, a Jim Morrison album with music by The Doors. It was actually nominated for a Grammy the year it was released, and it is featured in Oliver Stone's 1991 movie about the band. When mentioning the strangest thing he's ever seen at a show, Jefe mentions the rain delay at Dick's from September 2nd, 2022, and the naked guy who was cheered on by the crowd. I would honestly like to take this opportunity to honor Tim Gazelle, better known as Frenchie, who was that naked guy, and he was honored by the band on New Year's Eve 2022 when they went through their history, and dancers dressed to look like Frenchie were part of the awesome gag that year. Frenchie unfortunately died of lung cancer in April 2023. July 22nd, 2016, the worst Phish show I've ever seen to date, and the only Phish show I've seen at the Forum, has a rating of 2.5 out of 5 on Phish.net. Now, the people at Phish.net will be the first to tell you not to trust ratings, but there's something to it when over 50 reviews suggest that a show is mediocre at best. If you want to waste some good time, take a look at the reviews for that show, most of which were written that same night or within a day or two of the show being played. When talking about the vocal jam in You Enjoy Myself, Jefe says that he thinks this was a particularly long You Enjoy Myself. According to Phish.in, the track listing is listed at 23 minutes and 59 seconds. Phish has played LA Woman exactly twice to date, including this version at the Forum. The last and only other time that they played it was on December 30th, 2003 at the American Airlines Arena in Miami, coming out of Tube to start set 2. And finally, Jefe states that Say It To Me Santos from this show is the only jammed out version to date of that song. As of this recording, the band has played Santos 51 times, so here's to hoping the next one will be just as energetic and jammed out. The track timing for this version is just under 12 minutes and definitely worth a listen. And that's it for today's episode. I'd like to thank Jefe from Arizona for joining me today, Phish.net for their help with the fact check, the Mockingbird Foundation for everything they do to help support music education for children, Phish.in for the recording used in today's episode, and thank you for listening. If you enjoy Attendance Bias, please support the show. You could leave a rating and a review of it on your favorite podcast app, and you could go to www.buymeacoffee.com/attendance bias and donating anything you can. Every penny helps, I promise. Thank you again so much for listening, and I'll see you next time on Attendance Bias.